tell you himself. But I'm not just carrying this just to carry it. You'll hear more about what it is and why you need to have one, carry it, share it, and everything else. But without further ado, let me introduce what has been an inspiration, not only to me, but I'm sure to others who already know him, and that is, if I may say, Dr. Vincent Intondi.
Can everybody hear me okay? I know there was an echo or... Can you talk louder? Everybody okay? So louder? Okay. First, before I get started, I just want to thank a couple people, specifically Joanne Robinson, Jim Anderson, and New York State Peace Action for bringing me here on such a special night. I'd first like to explain to you how this book came about. It's been 10 years in some way, shape, or form of making. In 2005, I made my first trip to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I was a graduate student then. And I was so affected, so moved, so filled with anger and guilt that when I came back, I talked to my advisor and I said, I'm not sure what to do. Because for so much of my academic life and my life as an activist, it had revolved around the Black freedom movement and civil rights. And I'm not sure how to put now these two passions of mine, eliminating racism and eliminating nuclear weapons, together. And he said, answer me one question. What did African Americans think about dropping the atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Now when I pitched that idea to colleagues and other professors, they said, you're not going to find anything. African Americans were too busy trying to gain their own equality and freedom, understandably so. They didn't have time to worry about nuclear weapons. Well, they were wrong. On June 6, 1964, a group of Hiroshima survivors came to New York City on a World Peace Study mission. The great Japanese-American activist Yuri Kachiyama was the one organizing their visit. When they came here, she said to them, while you stay here in Harlem, what is it that you'd like to do most? And they all responded, meet Malcolm X. But Malcolm, at the time, was in the Middle East and in Africa. So Yuri Kachiyama started writing letters to him in his office. She thought none of them ever actually got to him. The last day they were together, they were at a reception at her house, her apartment. And there was a knock at the door. When she opened the door, there stood Malcolm. He spent the day with those survivors of the bomb, explaining to them how imperialism, colonialism, the bomb, the Black freedom movement were connected. He understood how these things were inextricably linked. He understood, like so many before him, the issue is human rights. So my book examines those Black anti-nuclear activists who consistently combined the struggle for freedom in the United States with liberation movements around the world and issues of nuclear disarmament. Now, if you look at the scholarship of African American history, what we do in this country is we separate African Americans from the general U.S. narrative. Open our kids' textbooks and you see Harriet Tubman and Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks in their nice, neat little categorical boxes. February comes and we jam everything we can in, and that covers Black history. Now this has started to change over the last 10 years. More and more scholars have started to examine the role of African Americans in international affairs, looking at the roles of colonialism, Pan-Africanism. But the problem is the common argument with all of these scholars is that any activism in the Black community with international events dies in the 1950s with McCarthyism. It was so brutal in this country that that's what silenced them. I'm arguing that if you look specifically at the nuclear issue, that is not true. That yes, bombs were weakened, but that this continues through the 1950s, into the 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond. And I started asking asking questions. Like, what role did it play that the first victims of the nuclear attack were non-white? Did the way African Americans were treated in this country cause them to have a more critical critique of U.S. foreign policy? And what role did the Black Popular Front play in critiquing U.S. foreign policy? And it's this issue that combines artists and musicians and activists and journalists in the Black community. And of course, it's not monolithic. Some were looking at this issue just through the lens of peace, saying we can have a more peaceful world without nuclear weapons. Others were looking at it through the lens of race, and yet others through colonialism. When Harry Truman dropped the bomb on August 6, 1945, the majority of the American public rejoiced. Gallup had a poll immediately afterwards in which 85% of the American public agreed with Truman's decision to wipe Hiroshima off the map. In fact, 22% of those polled said they wished Japan hadn't surrendered so he could have killed more Japanese people. And in fact, no poll up until late October of 1945 ever showed more than 4.5% of the respondents critical of Truman's decision. And this was because in our country we had a genocidal race hatred against the people of Japan. Worse than anything we've seen even after 9/11 towards people of Middle Eastern descent. The Japanese, in images and pictures, were consistently reduced to being animals, apes, monkeys, vermin, making them less human so it's easier to commit violence against them, something, of course, we did all the way back to slaves in this country. In fact, the motto of the Marines at the time was, "Remember Pearl Harbor, keep them dying." General Joseph Stilwell wrote to his wife, "When I think about these bow-legged cockroaches have ruined our calm lives, it makes me want to wrap Jap guts around every lamppost in Asia." And we don't do this with any other people. We're very careful to separate Nazis from Germans, fascists from Italians, but not Japan. They were all guilty. But this wasn't the reaction inside the Black community. And so some of the first groups that I looked at, or the first areas I researched, was the Black press. Papers like the Chicago Defender and the Pittsburgh Courier, the Baltimore Afro-American. And over again, what I found, not just from the editors and the columnists, but from letters to the editor, was the same response, critical of Truman's decision, questioning why he did this. I started going through sermons of Black clergy immediately after the bombing, and I found again a visceral response, condemning Truman, saying we don't have enough religion to stop this, and questioning the issue of race. One of the first to come out and question the issue of racism in this was Langston Hughes, asking why we dropped it on people of color in Japan. And Hughes was right to ask the question. Harry Truman was not, if not the most, certainly one of the most racist presidents in our history. Harry Truman was a man who, if you read his letters to his wife, his diaries, he rarely refers to African Americans as anything other than the N-word. He brags in interviews that in his family you got slaves to start out the housekeeping with for wedding presents. His mother openly supported the Confederacy, and when she first visited him at the White House, said she'd rather sleep on the floor than ever step foot in Lincoln's bedroom. And in fact, Truman actually sent a $10 check to the Ku Klux Klan to join, but they gave it back to him because he refused to fire Catholic workers. Zora Neale Hurston, who many argue was very apolitical in her life, I found a letter she wrote to Claude Barnett, in which she referred to Truman as, quote, the butcher of Asia, upset of why more African Americans weren't rising up on this issue. And of the most immediate criticism, the harshest came, of course, from the Popular Front, specifically W.E.B. Du Bois and Paul Robeson. Now, I'm so glad that Steve McQueen, the director of 12 Years a Slave, has agreed to do a biopic on Paul Robeson, because this hero, this amazing individual, so forgotten in our history. Robeson, in June 1946, in a rally in Madison Square Garden, 20,000 people there, went immediately at the colonialism issue, saying, where is the United States getting our material for nuclear weapons? And the response, of course, was the Belgian-controlled Congo. Du Bois, who had already traveled to Japan and was lionized there, had said that bombing a colored nation would set back the progress of non-white peoples for decades to come, referring to Truman as, and comparing him to Hitler. But a lot of this immediate criticism was muted In 1947, with the Truman Doctrine, long before George Bush ever said with us or against us, it was Truman who put that line in the sand and made people choose. So groups like the NAACP made a sharp turn to the right. The worst thing you could be labeled in this country was black and red, and to be anti-nuclear now meant that you were pro-communist. And so as many groups were destroyed and people fell silent, not everyone in the black community could go along. Those like Du Bois and Robeson and others, they saw that we now had the hydrogen bomb, that Truman was threatening to use nuclear weapons in Korea. Another people of color said, we can't stand by, peace is not going to be a bargaining chip. In joining a communist-led peace movement out of Stockholm, it was Du Bois and Robeson that started the Ban the Bomb petition in this country in the 50s. Millions of people signing it, Charlie Parker, Duke Ellington, Marian Anderson, and so many more. I tell you now that they passed the petition along and it seems like not a big deal. Because to our young kids, to my students, they can go online and in one click they've signed a petition. But there were real consequences back then. People lost their jobs. They were physically beaten. Du Bois was brought up on charges of being an agent for the Soviet Union, of course found not guilty. And Robeson's reputation was destroyed. And of course, I can't talk about anti-nuclear activism in the black community without mentioning Dr. King. Most people contend that Dr. King's radical side came with his Beyond Vietnam speech, April 4th, 1967. However, if you look specifically at the issue of nuclear weapons, you will realize he was speaking out against this issue a decade earlier, as early as 1957. Routinely speaking in black churches, telling churches it was your mission to speak out against nuclear weapons. Speaking to college students, saying, what does it matter if we integrate lunch counters if we're all dead? When that happens, how can you not see the connections there? He fought for a nuclear test ban and pushed John Kennedy for that. And where did King get all of his gusto and his passion for this issue? His wife, of course. Coretta Scott King was an activist dating back to her days at Antioch College, a member of Women's Strike for Peace, Women's International League of Peace and Freedom. And she joined other black female activists connecting the issue of colonialism and peace and freedom. But like so many of these black female activists, they had to deal with the racism inside these peace organizations, because so many of these peace organizations were dominated by white middle-class activists who carried, in many cases, their own prejudice. In fact, Women's Strike for Peace, they were going to have an annual conference in Detroit, and black members wanted to carry signs that said, desegregation or disintegration. The white members said no, and it was Coretta that had to broker the peace deal. If we look at the 1950s, all of this now is starting to come to a head in the mid-1950s. In 1954, you had, of course, Brown versus Board of Education. A year later, the heinous murder of Emmett Till. Months later, Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat on a bus. What many people don't realize is that same year, 1955, was the Bandung Conference, the first all-African Asian conference. And their platform was against colonialism, racism, and nuclear weapons. And all signs were now leading to the Sahara. Because in the late 1959, the French government, wanting to be a world power, announced they were going to test their first nuclear weapon in Africa. Ghana especially, here they are in an independence movement with Kwame Nkrumah, were scared of a nuclear fallout, what it would do to the cocoa industry. There was an activist in this country that rose up to try to stop it. His name was Bayard Rustin. So many don't know Bayard Rustin because he was gay and marginalized in this movement. But Rustin's activism dated back to the 1930s. And Rustin, seeing these connections between Africa and here, he said, I have to go, and he put together a team of activists with Britain, the United States, and in Ghana. And he went and put himself on the line with other activists, repeatedly trying to stop the French test. Sadly, in February of 1960, the French actually did test their nuclear weapon. But I wouldn't argue it was a failure, I'd argue it was a success. Because so much protest happened after that that they had to abandon their test. This type of protest, as you'll see in my book, went through the 60s and the 70s. And of course, it really culminates in the 1980s with why we're here tonight. In the 1980s and 1982, we had the largest anti-nuclear peace march in this country's history. And that June 12, 1982 march, there was a real issue there. So many of the white groups didn't want black participation. But it was a Black United Front led largely by Reverend Herbert Daughtry that ended up getting 50% of that leadership to be black and having such a strong voice in the 80s. And I know I'm keeping you between food, so I'm going to wrap this up. Now let me just touch on a moment. We had this debate tonight. Let me just touch on a moment on President Obama. Obama was the toughest part for me to write in this book.
You're echoing.
Say it?
You're echoing.
Okay, sorry.
Where's this? No,
Feedback.
it's not you. Who's got the sound system working? Because in the back they cannot hear you. That's the only reason I came forward.
Oh.
Just hold the mic closer to you.
Well, let me, I think that'll be more better. Let me touch for a moment on President Obama. Obama was the hardest part for me to write. Because as a historian, the worst thing I can do is predict something and it not come true. The first thing is to understand that before President Obama, how many black politicians were fighting for this issue? The great Congressman Ron Dellums, Jesse Jackson. People forget his primary campaigns and his platform in '84 and '88. Chicago Mayor Harold Washington, one of Obama's biggest heroes. And when Obama, dating back to his days at Columbia, had always been against nuclear weapons. As a candidate, he was against nuclear weapons. And then when he gets in office, he gives his Prague speech, the most anti-nuclear speech any president's given outside of maybe John Kennedy's commencement address at American University in 1963. I take students to Hiroshima and Nagasaki every year, and I remember going back there the year after he did that. He had gotten the New START treaty pushed through. He had Ambassador Roux speak at the Hiroshima ceremony. And I remember the jubilation of the people in Hiroshima. They actually had shirts they were wearing calling themselves the Obama majority. People were handing me stacks of letters saying, bring these back to your president and thank him for everything he's doing. Meeting with 47 countries, getting Chile and the Ukraine and Mexico and others to give over their nuclear weapons making material. But there's always a but with Obama, right? That's the frustrating thing. We got immigration, but he deported more people than any president in history. He ended the Iraq War, but here we are with drones, Afghanistan, so on and so forth. The frustrating thing with this issue, though, is he didn't just stagnate, he actually went backwards. He took money out of non-proliferation programs and put it into building more nuclear weapons. His budget calls for $1 trillion over the next 30 years to build more nuclear weapons, and probably the most unconscionable thing is his relationship with this extreme right-wing Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in Japan right now in his Asia-Pacific pivot. Well, what can we learn from this research? What can you learn from this book? What have I hopefully brought to the table? The first thing is, I get so frustrated when people say, is Obama black enough? Or has he done enough for the black community? His Iran deal is the most important thing of his presidency. If by his Iran deal he has stopped war in the Middle East, how many non-white lives did he just save? This issue is a black issue. India, Pakistan, the Middle East, Northern Africa. And if we look and study and see, for so many years, African Americans who have struggled, who have been in misery, and then wield their collective power on this issue, it's extraordinary. And so I don't know what's going to happen over the next year with Obama in office. I don't know what will happen on the nuclear front. But that's not on him, that's on us. He never said, yes, I can. He said, yes, we can. And every single thing that he has done, he has been pushed to do. You know, this weekend, when the bombing in Turkey happened, I was so disgusted, I was so angry, that I immediately started writing an article that went up on Huffington Post today called Peace is Not Weak. Because in our country, the word peace peace activists are looked at as hippies, idealists, dreamers, weak. It's not a man. Bombing is what it means to be a man. But what I see in this room is not weak. The Reverend Herbert Daughtry is not weak. Malala is not weak. Every time Dr. King stepped outside for peace and was afraid to be assassinated, that's not weak. So fighting for peace to me is one of the most strongest, courageous things you can do. What I see in this room are warriors. And so when you start to look at this history and these issues through the lens of race and class and colonialism, then you'll start to understand them and appreciate them and fight for them the way that perhaps the person that understood it best, Malcolm X, knew. That the issue for us has never been civil rights. It's always been and will continue to be universal human rights. Thank you so much.
You can utilize the stairs going up.
We are glad to be here tonight commemorating the great work of this organization, commemorating the long-standing, freedom-fighting, wonderful work of the Reverend Daughtry, and thanking you for being with us as we continue to march for peace around the world. At this time, God, we thank you for the food we're about to receive. Some of us have already started. We thank you for the food we've already eaten. And we thank you for those hands that prepared it. Let it be nourishment to our bodies as this evening nourishes our souls. We ask it in the precious and matchless name of the Prince of Peace. Amen.
Amen. Without further ado, Joanne Robinson.
Good evening, everyone. We are thrilled that you're all here. You don't know, we don't have an RSVP, and we said, my God, are they coming, are they coming? And here you are, all of you, all 125, fantastic. It's because you are believers in peace and believers in a better world, and that nuclear abolition has got to continue to be the key, and a peaceful world. And again, we welcome you. And we're just thrilled that you're all here. And what I'd like to say this evening, Peace Action just believes, without all of you, the grassroots people, this evening, you are all here. Fantastic program for you, part of that literary side, Intondi. And there are even people here who are mentioned in his book. So you've got to buy the book over there. It's people like John Collins, who's mentioned the book, from Queen Laity, Social Corporate Responsibility. There's Viney Burroughs, the actress who he talks about in the book. There at the table, Women for Racial Economic Equality are here. And our own matriarch, 94 years old, Judy Lerner from Women Strike for Peace. Women Strike for Peace are a very important part of his book when he talks about it. Buy the book. And we also have, not only do you have the literary artists, but you have the vocal artists tonight. The wonderful Jeannine, Otis, and Larry Marshall. From Broadway to the Metropolitan Opera, to jazz, to St. Mark's Church, where she provides a wonderful choral music, spiritual, and reaches out for peace to the people. Can you believe we're being so graced in the honoring of the Daughtries to have all these wonderful people to participate this evening? And they are going to do a medley of freedom songs. And just before you hear this wonderful group of freedom songs, and Larry Marshall sang in Porgy Best at the Met, so you can imagine what a fantastic voice. The two of them have that team. It's incredible. And don't forget your membership in Peace Action. If you're not a member, sign up tonight. We know you've paid your money to be part this evening, but there's nothing wrong with adding a little or a few dollars. And you can see in your book, it's all tax deductible. So we invite you. But without any more conversation, let's hear Jeannine, Otis, and Larry Marshall. They're going to do a wonderful medley of freedom songs.
Good evening.
Yeah, here we are. Thank you very much. Thank you for having us. We're very proud to be here and like to do some what we call freedom songs, but they're basically traditional and some of them I know you're probably familiar with. So we'd like to start with this one. All we are saying is give peace a chance. Join us. All we are saying is give peace a chance. All we are saying is give peace a chance. All we are saying is give peace a chance.
This is from somebody that I consider a musical prophet, Mr. Bob Marley. Oh, pirates, yes, they rob us. So minutes after they took us from the bottomless pit, but my hands were made strong by the hand of the Almighty, who fathered in this generation triumphantly. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? All I ever heard, redemption song. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Have no fear for atomic energy. None of them can stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Some say it's just a part of it we got to fulfill. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? 'Cause all I ever heard, redemption song, songs of freedom.
There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sick soul. Sometimes I feel discouraged and I think my work's in vain. But then the Holy Spirit revives my soul again. There is a balm in Gilead sick soul. If you cannot preach like Peter, if you cannot pray like Paul, then tell the love of Spirit and say, died for all. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sick soul.
So this next song is a work song that I want you to work with. So I just want you to say, huh, everybody. Huh! That wasn't enough one. Huh! Take this hammer, huh, and carry to the captain. Huh! Take this hammer, huh, and carry to the captain. Huh! Take this hammer, huh, and carry to the captain. Huh! Tell him I's gone. Huh! Tell him I's gone. You're gonna sing in a minute. Huh! One more. If he asks you, huh, tell him I's running. Huh! If he asks you, huh, tell him I's running. Huh! If he asks you, huh, tell him I's running. Huh! Tell him I's gone. Huh! Tell him I's gone. Hold on, sing. Take this hammer, huh, and carry to the captain. Huh! Take this hammer, huh, and carry to the captain. Huh! Take this hammer, huh, and carry to the captain. Huh! Tell him I's gone. Huh! Tell him I's gone. Thank you.
This is another one, but this is, I love this. I heard it first done by Nina Simone. And then Carl Malmsteen is a wonderful composer and music director and choir. Heard it with him, and I decided that I just had to do this. Nobody's fault but mine. Nobody's fault but mine. If I die and my soul be lost, nobody's fault but mine. I had a mother who could pray. I had a mother who could pray. If I nobody's fault but mine. I had a mother who could sing. I had a mother who could sing. If I died and my soul be lost, nobody's fault but mine. Oh, nobody's fault but mine. Nobody's fault but mine. If I die and my soul be lost, nobody's fault but mine. Oh Lord, nobody's fault but mine. Nobody's fault but
So we're going to end our segment with a sing-along from you, with a song that we've sung with so many people. Beloved Peacemaker, beloved Odetta, there's so many wonderful people. This little light of mine.
this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, say this little light of mine, yeah, I'm gonna let it shine. I said this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Well, all through the world, I'm gonna let it shine. I said all through the world, I'm gonna let it shine. I said all through the world, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, now everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. I say everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. All over the world, I'm gonna let it shine. I said all over the world, I'm gonna let it shine. I said all over the world, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. It's now this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. I said this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Well, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let
Let it all hang out and just be reinvigorated, to be encouraged. Because those work songs, that, believe me, they weren't just songs of yesterday, they are songs of today. That is exactly what Vincent and Intondi was talking about. We're in a world that has cultivated us about being bullies and being all all this bad. It's not about that. But what is the truth is that you, all this history in the room, past history, present history, future history, are made in the footprint that lead down the road toward the kind of world we need, a world that is better for all and that is absent of weapons of war. I rise not only introduce our honoree, but I rise, and I want to say, before I introduce him, where he comes from, they've been all of this week, just ending on Sunday, with a convocation. So he didn't come to preach. In fact, it is a time that we need to honor. It is a past time that we need to honor. Vincent Intondi opened our eyes and our ears as he spoke. In his book, he takes us deeper because there's much history that has walked the same path of our honoree. But let me just tell you this. We're in this moment that talks about not only Black Lives Matter, but as you know, it's centered around the whole development of the militarization of our police, but also the outstanding negative behavior of our police forces. It didn't just start this year or last. No. Police officer by the name of Robert Torstney shot a young, unarmed, unengaged in any activity of negativeness in the head, and then claimed he had an epilepsy fit. In 1977, shortly after they found a no true bill against the officer, no reason to indict him, there was a preacher. You know, they say, how will the people hear without a preacher? Come on. So the preacher in his congregation went before the officers of the Brooklyn DA and began to do like Moses did to Pharaoh about let my people go. And he raised the issue. And while it started for some there, like little old me, it was that effort. It led in 1977 to what we know as Black Christmas, 1977, which led a boycott in downtown Brooklyn. Downtown Brooklyn shut down some stores and brought others to their knees eventually. But let me just say further, the consistency of the work of this preacher. Long road, tough road, unacknowledged road. His work continued. Not because the limelight was on him, because he was committed. Yeah, it was a kind of labor. But he prevailed. Not only on the streets of Brooklyn, but the streets of the world. You can't talk about Nelson Mandela and not talk about Reverend Herbert Daughtry. Not only did he walk with him when he came to New York, but before he got out of prison, he spoke on his behalf. He raised the clarion call about why we must push back against the militarism, the violence in the world. I'm going to end because one can get caught up in all that good singing. You know, the spirit move, you got to let the spirit have his way. I mean, seriously, you got to let the spirit have his way, but I'm gonna be orderly, and I'm just going to say that, you know, the legacy of Reverend Daughtry, that's why he's called the people's pastor. He didn't just stay in the wall, but guess what? When you look at Reverend Daughtry, you have to look at Reverend's Daughtry. His wife, Karen Daughtry, there all the way. Everywhere he was, she was. And sometimes when we honor folks, you know, we're doing the right thing, but I just want to broaden the picture. Look, when I was young, I used to watch the Kung Fu series. And in it, you know, the master would always say, Grasshopper, what do you see? And Grasshopper would say what he see, but he would also, do you not also see? So what I'm saying to you, Grasshopper, as we look at those who have labored, They haven't been singular. And we have helped them, but when you look at Reverend Daughtry, when you look at Reverend Herbert Daughtry, you're looking at Reverend Herbert Daughtry and Reverend Karen Daughtry. And so, without further ado, let me move on and let me ask Reverend Daughtry and let me introduce to some and just represent to others Reverend Herbert Daughtry. Reverend Dr. Herbert Daughtry and Reverend Dr. Karen Daughtry. Please, Karen, please join us. Please join us. Now, I'm going to turn this over to Reverend Daughtry, but I'm going to present Peacemaker Award to the Reverend Dr. Herbert Daughtry. Listen, when we talk about peace demands action, when you say
thank you, Brother Jim. You were so on target by calling my wife, Dr. Karen, forward and to receive the award because, you know, whatever way in which I have contributed to anything could not have been done without my wife of 55 years. So thank you for calling her up. And to you, Jim, thank you.
This is yours.
Okay, and thank you for your years of commitment, going all the way back to the Black United Front years. You were a stalwart then, and you're a stalwart now. Being here conjures up so many memories, all of the different memories clamoring for attention. Vinnie Barrow is here. Leslie and I go back to in which we organized and just to receiving an award is for the Sloane, William Sloane Coffin, in February 1977. We all went to Washington on the Vietnam question. John Collins was the major organizer of the clergy lay concerned about Vietnam. And at that conference, at that great gathering, there are persons whose name I name is here forevermore, but Michael V. Brown was one of the persons who were there from Stanford, and I remember going to him and I said, man, listen, y'all don't have no black folks on the national level of this organizing. And he said, you know, you're right. And then in April of the same year, Dr. King made his major speech while I opposed the war in Vietnam at the Riverside Church, which was the last time I saw him. And I always felt that they must have gone to Dr. King and asked him to participate. So there are many of you with whom I've struggled across the years. Now, I know you said that you want to give me an award, and I'm not deceived. I know that when you get my age, some of y'all my age, you may not want to admit it. I don't mind admit it. I'm 85, so I don't mind. So when you get to be up there, people just give you, they just feel sorry for you. And I know the game, but poor Reverend Daughtry, he's been out there over 50-some years. Let's give him an award, and make his heart glad before he leaves the scene, And so I know, so I don't care. I'm glad to get the award. Nothing better than getting the award. But the question always is, if for an award to have any significance at all, and we all can't wait to Reverend Sekou to speak, and so I should hasten and leave space for others. But, there are three things that seem to me that makes an award worth having. One is who's giving it, right? I mean, who's giving the award. And so to receive award from Peace Action and of New York, and you all struggler together, takes on special significance. And then the next question is whose name are you giving the award, and whose name are you giving the award? Well, I tell you, to receive award in the name of William Sloane Coffin, I tell you, you have to treasure to the highest. He was a kind of Superman, one of those rare characters that come to the stage of history once in a while. He was an athlete, he was a musician, he was a fighter for peace, he was a theologian, he was a scholar. He was all those kinds of things. But he was a peace activist. He loved justice. And to get an award in his memory, I should treasure to the highest. And then the other final thing, what are you giving? Why is somebody giving you an award? In this instance, Peace Action giving me an award. Well, I think you're giving it to me for peace. At least that's what I've been told. And I don't know if there's anything more precious, of greater value in a lifetime than to receive an award because somebody believed you fought for peace. Yeah. Yes, sir. Jesus once said to his learners, his disciples, "Blessed are ye, peacemakers, for you shall be called the children of God." Amen. So all of you who've gathered here on this great occasion, you can pat yourself on the back and say, I'm a child of God. Yes. Now, I assume that everybody here believe in God, but if you don't believe in God, just say, I'm the son and daughter of something bigger than I. But for those of us who believe that there is an Almighty, there is a Creator, you can say to yourself, when you look yourself in the eye, in the mirror in the morning, whatever you're going through, whatever the challenges that you face, whatever the whips and scorns of time, whatever the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, at least you can look yourself in the eye and say, I am a peacemaker. And that means I am a child of the Creator. And so I go back to my seat, patting myself on the back. I'm a child.
The 2015 William Sloane Jr. Peacemaker Award honoree, the Reverend Herbert Dr. Daughtry. Indeed. And I'm going to join him in the seat next to him, and I'm going to bring forth our student coordinator, Kate Alexander. And boy, I wasn't kidding when I talk about present, future, and on and on and onwards. Kate.
Thank you, Jim. And oh man, I don't know why I ever agreed to speak after Reverend Daughtry. I can't even imagine why. But it would be so remiss of me not to thank you on behalf of everyone who's working in Peace Action now, in particular the students who are here today. You have sparked such a fire for peace activism, and especially I think we can say that he sparked it again here tonight. And now we have other work to honor, and that's the work of the people who are carrying that light forward. I am so happy to announce that this is the inaugural presentation of the Don Shaffer Student Peacemaker Award. And what's so incredible about this award is because it's the inaugural presentation, it's really not just about the incredible work of the honorees, SUNY Binghamton, but about the work of our student organizers overall. This award would not have been created if they weren't being tireless advocates for peace, which is really something incredible when you consider that the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and Afghanistan have been going on since most of them were between 4 and 7 years old. It's shocking because when you grow up in a world of war, to have the moral strength to demand peace, when you don't know what that alternative means, when you haven't experienced in your own country, is truly a test of your character. And I want to commend every student organizer and student advocate who's here tonight. So I'm going to ask them all to please stand up. If we could just recognize all of their accomplishments. And when I say tireless work of student activists, I do mean tireless. Our honorees and all of our organizers are doing some of the most incredible peace work that you can imagine. We have peace studies minors that are being created on campuses where there were no peace studies minors. We have students who are just hitting 18 and just at voting age who are coordinating campaigns around the Iran deal. We had students making calls, writing letters, and visiting congressional offices, and those students who organized that are in this room tonight. They are truly the next generation of peace leaders, and I'm very happy to be among them tonight and to work with them on a regular basis. This award is, of course, being given in memory of Don Shaffer, who, in the words of our own fearless leader, Sally Jones, has been a coach, mentor, and visionary for Peace Action New York State. And what we benefited from most of all was his tremendous optimism. And it's in speaking with people who had the good fortune to know him that you see this incredible glow come over them, where you know that this is a man who didn't just, demand the best work possible, but he really gave you the energy to make it a reality. And that's not something that you can say of every advocate in the field. So we were blessed to be in his presence. All right. And I am pleased tonight to welcome to the stage, as I will do now so I can wrap this up, Robert Shaffer, who will be presenting the award to our honoree, SUNY Binghamton.
Good evening, thank you. I am pleased to present this award on behalf of my brothers Nathan, who is here from Atlanta, and David, who could not make it from Nashville. We are honored that Peace Action of New York State chose to name this award for an outstanding student chapter for our father, Don Shaffer, who was a longtime leader of Peace Action and before that of SANE, both nationally and in New York State. Donald died 2.5 years ago at the age of 84, and was involved in thinking about ways to expand Peace Action's work up until the last week of his life. As an activist in Peace Action of New York State, my father was always committed to developing student chapters in order to harness the energy and passion of those who have the time to discuss important ideas in and out of the classroom of how we act as a society, and also as a way to develop future leaders of the peace and justice movements. And you've been seeing some of the photos of the work of these student chapters on the screen during the dinner. Donald, my father, always remembered fondly his time as a student at Brooklyn College in the 1940s, where his involvement in political action not only tried to prevent the growing militarism of the early Cold War years, but also this activism honed his organizing skills. Among the particular activities that Donald was involved in at Brooklyn was the campaign against what was then called Universal Military Training, or UMT, which the nationwide movement of pacifists, progressives, and religious groups ultimately did defeat. One of the other activists at Brooklyn against UMT was a fellow student named Doris Freed. Don and Doris married just after graduation in 1949, and they remained married for 60 years, or 60 years minus 1 week, until my mother's death in 2009. Don was on the National Board of SANE in the 1980s, and he was one of those who worked for the merger with the Nuclear Freeze campaign. They wanted to combine SANE's institutional strength with the youthful energy and grassroots orientation of the Nuclear Freeze campaign, which had many student leaders, activists, and chapters, to produce a truly national, broad-based organization working on a range of peace issues. It was first called SANE Freeze, and now, of course, Peace Action. Some of you know that Don went back to school at the age of 59 to get a law degree, a lifelong dream of his, at New York University. Aside from being caught up again in the world of ideas, debates, and ways to translate the insights of the classroom to the world of activism, being around the bright and accomplished students at NYU Law School helped keep him young and inspired and reinforced his commitment to developing student activists. For all of these reasons, Don would be pleased to know that Peace Action of New York State now has 9 campus chapters, and he would be humbled to know that the board decided to name in his honor its annual award for the most active chapter. He would also, by the way, be very pleased with the focus of tonight's event, the interconnections between the peace movement and the civil rights movement, as his lifelong activism spanned these movements, from involvement in anti-discrimination campaigns in housing in Chicago and New York City in the 1940s, and in Great Neck in the 1960s, to his work on the Jesse Jackson and David Dinkins campaigns of the 1980s and 90s and beyond. Don would be honored that his name is on the same program as one recognizing the decades-long activism for peace and justice of Reverend Dr. Herbert Daughtry. So we are proud to present this Don Shaffer Student Peacemaker Award to the Binghamton University chapter, and they don't have to wait till the age of 85 to get an award. Peace Action Binghamton University was founded in April 2013 and is dedicated to empowering student advocates and taking action on issues of peace and justice. They have created a strong culture of peace action, not just within their chapter, but across their campus, changing the activist environment for their peers and for future generations of Binghamton University students. Their accomplishments include hosting 2 conferences on Peace Action's key issues, lobbying their elected representatives, and Kate was talking about this, to pursue peace policies and fostering active citizenship of their student body on peace issues, bolstering the cause of peace through a series of events covering topics ranging from ISIS, the Halabia, genocide in Iraq, the Israel-Palestine conflict, police militarization, and conflict resolution. They have had active leadership and campus-wide events that speak to key peace issues, including the Eric Garner Assembly, a Just Food rally, a global service fair, and an American Kurdish Council event. They are also one of those creating the Peace Studies minor, again, that Kate talked about, which is now in the final stages of completion. 3 of the organizers of the chapter are here. The second formal student organizer for Peace Action at Binghamton was Mallory Schmackpfeffer, who is an English major and who will be graduating this year with the class of 2016. She is from Rochester. Last year's student organizer was Mavish, say it again, Mavish Hoda of the class of 2015, who is a double major in neuroscience and studio art, an intriguing combination for me. She is from Binghamton. And the current student organizer who will be accepting the award on behalf of the chapter is Sophie Gamer, a senior who will be graduating this spring with a major in cell molecular biology. Sophie is from Bedford in Westchester County. So please join me, my brothers, and the Peace Action New York State Board in congratulating the very deserving Binghamton University chapter on being presented with this first Don Shaffer Student Peacemaker Award. And please welcome Sophie Gamer.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I just want to be very short, but from Mallory and Mavish and I, I'm sure you can all understand that this is never easy, but events like this and hearing stories like everyone who's shared their stories really motivates us and it keeps us going. So thank you so much, and we're excited to hear everyone else to speak later. Thank you.
So I want to give everyone here sort of a picture of what these students are up against on their campuses. For those of you who it's been a while, if you've been in a poli-sci class, you should know that the curriculum hasn't changed. What's so incredible is that despite an age of war that really looks nothing like the Cold War, that's the rhetoric that's used in classrooms. From my own experience and from speaking with students, when they talk about nuclear weapons, they still talk about security when we know better.
problems in Syria. We hear about people escorting their children out of the way, out of harm's way, out of the war game, and moving them somewhere. We sit here in the United States of America comfortably every night. Comfortable justice. We have more. We have to make our children aware. We have to make our friends aware. We have to keep pushing.
Thank you, David. I'd like to welcoming Sally to the stage to introduce our keynote speaker.
Before I welcome our keynote speaker, I wanted to draw your attention to objects to my left. This is an art project by Arle Sklar-Weinstein, who's here. Could you stand up, please? These look like very colorful kimonos, right? But get close to them if you can, and you'll see what they're made of. They're made of caution strips, police beware strips, and all this sort of thing. It's a connection of something that's a symbol of beauty with something that is something we've been working to avoid. War, and the name of it is War is Not Healthy for Children and Other Living Beings. And I hope you take a look. It's very simple, made with very simple materials, but beautiful from a distance and thought-provoking when you get close. So please come and look. So it is my honor tonight to introduce to you our keynote speaker. Reverend Sekou has traveled from St. Louis, Missouri to be with us today. He was actually born in the rural Arkansas Delta. He was raised in St. Louis, Missouri. And in 2014, he was a visiting scholar at Stanford University's Martin Luther King Education and Research Institute at the time of Michael Brown's killing. And he traveled to Ferguson, which was near where he went to high school. And in mid-August, he started his work on behalf of the Fellowship of Reconciliation, which is celebrating their significant 100th anniversary this year. We have material about that. So Reverend Sekou has been arrested multiple times since the start of the Ferguson uprising, including praying while black, alongside 40 other clergy and faith leaders and community members. And during the 500-strong Moral Monday protest at the police department during last year's Ferguson's uprising. And more recently, for Moral Monday 2015, as one of more than 50 people now facing federal charges following a sit-in at the Department of Justice. He comes to us as he says, a follower, not a leader, which I think is a very interesting way of looking at it. I think in this room, we're a room of both followers and leaders, followers in some ways and leaders in others. And it is that mixture, that conflict almost between the role of needing to do the work and needing to have somebody speak out and say the words that need to be said. So it is with that that I welcome Reverend Sekou to the podium. And thank you so much for traveling all this way to New York to be with us.
The hour is far spent. I won't be before you long. Thank you for keeping the introduction short because long introductions tend to set high expectations. Although I'm a third-generation Pentecostal preacher, I'm going to attempt to be uncharacteristically brief. I want to say thank you first to my friends in the room. It is always such an honor to be here with you. I've marched with many of you. I've gone to jail with a few of you. And I'm deeply honored to share the space. I see Sister Jackie Cavasso, whose work out of California, and we've been in a media room and trying particularly to end that war against the precious people of Iraq, and whose patience and guidance and education for me on nuclear weapons is one of the reasons that I am with you at this time. And then I see Reverend Julie Johnson Staples, a dear friend and colleague whose reassuring talks with me as I was struggling on a manuscript of a second book helped shape the work of that book. And then John Collins, I'm going to spend my time talking to these young folks, if you don't mind.
Just make sure you talk into the microphone.
And one of the things that once you get old, one of the things you will not get any more of is old friends. So be kind to those you struggle with. It is not simply about ideology. It is not simply about the right ideas. But if you're going to be a long-distance runner in this work, like John Collins, who is one of the founders of Clergy and Laity Concerned About Vietnam, who worked with Dr. King, and then some 40 years later took his time to spend time with me as we were creating Clergy and Laity Concerned About Iraq. If you're going to have that kind of friendship, be kind to one another. Because the only thing that'll guide you to this work is that a deep kindness, what we in Christianity that comes out of the Jewish tradition, this loving kindness that we attribute to the world's most famous Palestinian, Jesus. That you're gonna have to love your way out. It's the kind of love that makes Sister Burroughs, who's been in this work a long time, decide that she and some other grandmothers are going to go down to the police recruitment station in Times Square and say that we're going to enroll in the military to keep our children from going. That's the kind of love that is necessary for you to be long-distance runners in this work. And my God, when we talk about Herbert Daughtry, that when the history books are written about those who stood in this peculiar tradition that we call the prophetic tradition, those Christians who took serious the life and legacy of Jesus and who were willing to turn over the tables in the temple in order to stand in solidarity with the most vulnerable of society. Those kinds of folks, that kind of love. The kind of love that took old country boy from Arkansas about a decade ago and let him stand in his pulpit when he didn't know much of nothing about the big city and said, come on here, boy, you got something to say. That kind of love, the kind of love that emerges out of a Pentecostalism that is unique, that is preoccupied with signs and wonders, and that understands holiness as a form of social critique. Understands that a kind of Pentecostalism that has a hermeneutic of suspicion, that looks at the world and reads the signs and wonders, and that understands that in order for the world to be made right, that it must stand in solidarity with those who are the most vulnerable, who understands the way in which we work miracles, that we look at the material conditions and we say they are a lie. That kind of Pentecostalism that understands the world that way, that it looks at, it responds to Jean-Paul Sartre's inquiry. Jean-Paul Sartre raises the question, why go on? But it's the kind of religious belief, the kind of Pentecostalism that comes not simply out of a reading of a text, but out of some folks who come from Savannah, Georgia, who understand about making a way out of no way. That's the tradition that you're calling yourself, that you're going to be a part of. That's the kind of tradition that you're going to look at even when the administration says no. when your parents don't understand, when your friends don't understand, but you develop a kind of character and a kind of courage in such a way that you move over against time and space. And I come out of a tradition that when you young people make a decision that you're going to be in the tradition of John Collins, in the tradition of Herbert Daughtry, in the tradition of Julia Staples, in the tradition of Sister Burroughs, when you make a decision that you're going to stand in that kind of tradition, that I come from a people who believe that the stars line up on your behalf. That is that kind of power and belief that you will be able in the face, that you will have the kind of faith in the face of terror. And though they say a lot, they talk a lot about millennials, they talk about what you're not capable of and how you're selfish, but you've been the generation we've been waiting on. That I've seen young people like you night after night stand in front of tanks and tear gas and not bow down. That's what you're made of. But you can't get there on your own. Anna Julia Cooper says you must never forget the bridges that brought you over. And that these elders in this room, as my grandmother would say, can learn you something. They can tell you about more dangerous times with less resources that you have. Leslie Kagan, who had to go home to take care of her ailing partner, put 1 million people in the street, and there was no Twitter. There wasn't no Facebook. Wasn't even an internet. That kind of organizing that says you're going to do low technology, labor intensive organizing, that you're going to spend time with people, you're going to get to know them, that you're going to know their doings and their sufferings. And the kind of organizing that says when John Collins saw me, the first thing he asked me is not how I was doing and when was my next book coming out, but how are your children? That's a different way of being in the world. Because part of what we need for you to do is not only have the correct analytical analysis, and out of my own tradition, I pray that it's a democratic socialist one. But it's not simply about you having the right kind of analysis. But when one of you are putting your mama in the ground, will you have one of these organizers standing next to you? Because that kind of bond, that kind of relationship will be able to stand the test of time. Because you have to be able to develop a faith in the face of terror. And the Ferguson Rebellion has provided you the opportunity and the model to do that. And that there's going to be a future of the peace movement. If there's going to be even a future of religion in America, you will be the ones who embody that. And so we are depending on you. We are depending on you with our very lives. And the work that you are doing is holy and it is sacred, and it may not necessarily be connected to a holy other, but it's connected to a story bigger than yourself. There are people who came before you. And above all, we prayed you here. In those late night meetings that we used to have wrestling with United for Peace and Justice. It was in those meetings in your church basement. It was when you, John Collins, and Balfour Brickner and William Sloane Coffin met with Martin Luther King in the basement of Union Theological Seminary right before he was about to give his anti-Vietnam speech. We prayed for you. Hebrews 11:1 says that faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not hoped for. You are the substance of what we hope for. You're the evidence of what we could not see. That you are faith itself realized for us. And so we are holding you accountable. And so when you make mistakes, we shall correct you because we love you.
Amen.
And when you're doing right, we'll fight heaven and hell for you because you are ours and you belong to us. And then history will say of you when you are old men and women and you are standing here and you are giving this speech for some young people, they'll say of you, well done, well done, well done.
Thank you, Reverend Sekou. That was beautiful, and it was so inspiring, and it was wonderful. Thank you so much. Woo! I'm Sylvia Rodriguez-Case. I'm the administrator for Peace Action New York State, and I just want to thank everybody. I want to thank Reverend Daughtry, Reverend Sekou, Vincent Intondi, everybody who participated tonight, but thank you all for everything you've done for peace in this world. And you're very important, and you're an amazing bunch of people that we're honoring tonight. I also want to thank everybody who worked here. I want to thank the fundraising committee. I'm not going to name everybody, but there's a lot of wonderful people at Peace Action New York State. And to thank Mario and his crew here at All Souls Church, Robert and Isaac, and oh God, I'm so bad. Matthew, got it, okay. All of you guys who helped us so much tonight. It was a beautiful night. We thank you very much. We thank Susan Edgars from Flowers, Sticks, and Stones, who did the decorations. And to speak about that, there's a centerpiece, and the person who has the birth date closest to today, 10/13, that's yours, take home. This lovely bouquet in the center of the room. I just want to thank you and invite you to have dessert. We have coffee, tea, a cake, fruit, and all kinds of things. Is there something else I'm supposed to say, Sally? I don't know. Thank you so much.
And Joe is getting his. Here he comes. All right, Joe, you got it, right? All right. Okay.